I will say, your best bet at making more money is by leaving your
I knew you were going
company,
to say that. Yep.
right? Your biggest increase will always be
Mm-hmm.
when you jump to another company. And I know there's been people like me, I was with a particular bank for like a really long time,
Yeah.
and for me to leave was so painful.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when I went from making 77 to
Yeah. There
100,000,
you go.
right? And I would have never gotten
Yeah.
that pay increase
Yeah.
if I stayed at that
Yeah.
company. So that's one way to boost your income through a job
Mm-hmm.
or get a side
Yeah.
hustle.
Is it a tech podcast? Well, technically, yes. This is the show for current and future techies who are curious about exploring the world of tech. You'll get to hear from exciting guests, highlighting the diversity of roles and careers within the space, how you can get started, but also the life that comes along with it before, during, and after. My name is Stella, and this is the Technically Yes podcast. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Technically Yes podcast. I'm your host, Stella, and I'm super excited about today's episode. Today, I am joined by Tembeka Pratt. She is the founder of the platform She's Richer, and this platform is aimed at women of color, and it's focused all about self-care, building a great career, and managing your finances and doing so correctly. So I'm super excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me,
Thank
Tembeka.
you. So happy to be here.
Yes, of course, of course. So let's jump right into it.
Sure.
Um, when I met you, I think you added me on Instagram. I saw that you were the founder of She's Richer, and I told my friend, our mutual friend, I was like, "This is so dope. I love what this girl's
Aw.
doing. It's so important for the space that we're in, and especially for people of color." So,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about what you do.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, I mean, just to give context, this was
Mm-hmm.
not like a random thing that I stumbled upon. Like, I've been
Yes.
working in banking for over 10 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's very much a part of me. I love banking, I love money. And I was fortunate enough to have a financial advisor role be like the first ever big girl job I've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
So it was super instrumental in like my understanding of banking, my understanding of money, and also just like in my head creating these solutions for clients that were sometimes, triple my age at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just really started to notice that like, okay, out of the population of people that I'm serving, small fraction of it are Black people, and then an
Mm-hmm.
even smaller fraction of that are Black women. And there was a lot of like financial illiteracy that was going
Mm-hmm.
on. And it concerned me. It really did concern me because, like, I'm voting for everybody Black, like, and I'm
Yeah.
rooting for everybody Black. Like, I just don't want to see that happen. So, fast forward to the pandemic, we all had a lot of time on our hands, and
Mm-hmm.
I just was like, everybody's making an Instagram these days. At least let me create an Instagram that will help people and just share the knowledge I've already been giving to like family and friends already.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what I did. It was just super innocent. It was fun for me. And then it just kind of took off from there. And I've been like really happy with like who I've been able to help since.
Nice. Oh,
Hmm.
that's amazing. I love that so much. So if you
Yeah.
haven't noticed, this episode is literally all about money. So we're going to get our money right, going to make sure that we're prioritizing our finances. It's so important because what I find in the tech space is that people that get into tech, like there's a lot of money in tech, right?
Hmm.
So you are transitioning from a job where you're probably making, let's say, like 50, 60, 70,000. And
Right.
now you're almost doubling that, if not more in
Tripling.
some
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah.
And yeah, that transition can be quite overwhelming. For someone that may not come from money, you see it even more,
Hmm.
where
Yeah.
it's like, I know some people that are recent immigrants to Canada, so they come from so-called third world countries.
Yeah.
They come here, they get an amazing job, now they're making a ton of money.
Hmm.
So for someone that's in that position, what are your like initial suggestions for them in terms of managing their finances and making smart decisions ultimately?
100%. So there's a term called lifestyle creep. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
an actual term. And it's basically like, now that you're earning X more money than you used to,
Yeah.
your taste increases a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more. You go from like the McDonald's to the
Yeah.
fine dining, you go
Yeah.
from like your normal brands to luxury brands. And I know it's like it's
Mm-hmm.
part of human nature. I've actually gone through it myself.
Yeah.
But once you recognize it, like absolutely there's ways to curb it. So number one is recognizing it. Like, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure anybody who checks their app, or their banking apps or their statements, like you will notice it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that's like the first step. I think the second step is reevaluating your goals. So for me, I went from making like 40K when I sort of just moved to Toronto
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually getting to six figures. And like my goals from when I was making 40K to like six figures is very different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
you need to readjust. Maybe
Yeah.
now that you're making all this money, like rather than just spending it on luxury goods or eating out or whatever, now you're like, wow, I'm making enough money where I can actually save for my retirement or I can save
Mm-hmm. Okay,
towards a
okay.
house or anything really.
Yeah.
So you really do need to readjust. Like there's no way that your spending habits are going to be the same
Mm-hmm.
then versus now. So that's like the first thing I would say. The second one is actually seeking a professional. So whether that's
Mm-hmm.
like through taxes, that's a huge one.
Yeah, yeah.
Taxes, if you have somebody that you trust, like a financial advisor or a certified financial planner, or a financial coach or somebody like me, just seek help because
Mm-hmm.
yes, there's things that we may all know, but there's absolutely like way more things that we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
more money you make, naturally, there's systems in place and little loopholes, I guess I would say, that exist for those that are making more.
Yeah.
So why not take advantage of it? I think like as Black people, we fall into this way of thinking that like, oh, we just want to like save all our money, like put it in a savings account and that's it, and
Mm-hmm.
just look at it
Yep.
when we open our
Yep.
app.
Mm-hmm.
But some other folks in some other communities, like they are not doing that. Like they're using their
Right.
money in a way that will like grow. So I just want to
Yes.
see us do the same. So take advantage of
Yes.
those things that other groups have taken advantage of and like
Mm-hmm.
create a generational wealth. Um, and I think the last is like enjoy it. Like I
Yeah, okay.
actually say like enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
I hate when I'm coaching people or I'm talking to people like I'm very much of the school of like, yes, be responsible, but don't deprive yourself either.
Mm-hmm.
And those people that have been following me for a while, you'll know that I have a splurge account where I actually put money towards it, just like you would put money towards like a savings account.
Mm-hmm.
And that money goes towards like buying things that I want. So if it's like a new
Nice.
perfume or like going out with friends or um, you know, buying a luxury good or whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
I spend that money shamelessly and like guilt free. So if you're making it a lot more money, like enjoy it too, because like you worked hard
Mm-hmm.
for it and it really balances things out. So yeah, those are the
Okay,
tips.
okay. I have a few questions. That was amazing. That's
Mm,
yeah, that's really good. So, my first question is I want to know what was your allocation for like your luxury
mm,
spend and like your enjoyments account basically.
yes. Yeah.
What's the percentage there? What does that look like?
Between 5 and 10%.
Okay.
I mean, it's not much, but it's enough that it would rack
Mm-hmm.
up. Sometimes if
Mm-hmm.
I had a little bit more money, I would put more.
Okay, okay.
Sometimes if I like we bought a condo, me and my husband, we bought a condo. So obviously during like those months where money seemed to be flying out of my accounts,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't like prioritizing that account. But the
Mm-hmm.
good thing is if you put it on autopilot, it's always racking up. Me and my husband even have like a travel account,
Nice.
which is almost like a subset of a splurge account, if you want to call it that,
Mm-hmm.
just for like traveling, right? So yeah, 5 to 10%, not a lot, but it racked up, and I was able to
Right.
buy a luxury bag with it, some like luxury perfumes, going out
Mm-hmm.
in Toronto because we know that's expensive.
Yep.
So yeah, I love it, and you should all have
Okay.
one.
Okay, nice. Yeah, 5 to 10% is definitely
Yeah.
doable.
Hmm.
And that's kind of how I've always looked at things. Even when I was making like 35,000 a year, I
Hmm.
always put aside, because I love to travel. That's like my highest
Exactly.
priority.
Yeah.
And for me, it was always like, even if I put aside $20,
Mm-hmm.
$50 every paycheck, it adds up, right? I mean,
100%.
the days of all-inclusive vacations being like 600, $700 have definitely, those are
Yeah.
long gone.
Long
But back
gone.
then, it was very doable. So it's like,
Exactly.
yeah, little steps kind of get you there.
Yeah.
I completely agree. So the second question I had for you is you mentioned that your priorities in terms of your goals changing once you had that
Mm-hmm.
salary bump. Was it more so that like once you got a higher salary that you were saving more, or like
Mm.
what did those sort of goals look like?
I think I was just able to just see past like the basics. Like if
Okay.
we bring it to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Mm-hmm.
when I
Mm-hmm.
was like making, 30, 40K, it was very short-sighted. It was like
Right.
just get through each paycheck, get out of
Yeah.
overdraft, pay my debts, like pay my
Yeah.
credit card, and it wasn't like pay my rent, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And like maybe save like a little 20 to $50 every paycheck.
Okay.
But then when I started making more money, it was like, oh, like this is nice. Maybe instead of just putting the 20 or 50 in a savings account, let me actually invest because it's
Mm-hmm.
money that I don't need anymore. Like I
Yeah.
don't need to penny pinch. Um, Buying a property, which ended up happening,
Mm-hmm.
which was great. Traveling, being
Mm-hmm.
able to like go on a girls' trip,
Yeah.
paying off my car.
Yeah.
So those were like the bigger things that I was able to
Mm-hmm.
start working towards that felt impossible when I was making less, which I want to
Yeah.
just say is not impossible if you're making, less than 100,000 or whatever, but it just
Yeah.
felt like it, especially being in
Mm-hmm.
such an expensive city like Toronto.
Yeah. Okay, so you were in Toronto at that time.
Yes,
Okay,
girl.
got it, got it. Yeah. Okay,
Struggling.
that's it's yeah, listen, I've been there, so I get it. I
Yeah.
get it. It's interesting. I listened to this podcast a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure if you are familiar with different attachment styles, like in relationships.
Yes. Yep.
So she was talking about attachment styles to money. And that was
Mm.
very interesting, where she talked
Okay.
about like people that have anxious attachment styles and how that shows up in their finances.
100%.
People that are very secure, things like that. Because you mentioned something earlier where it's like, especially in the black community, it's like you'll save and then you're just watching your money. Like
Yeah.
it's not even bearing interest, it's
Yeah.
not doing anything, and it's just like you're like almost hoarding it, right?
Yes.
Because you
Yes.
have that anxious attachment to money. So that is definitely something I found to be very interesting because there are definitely correlations there.
100%. And there's like adverse like effects obviously to that. I was
Mm-hmm.
listening to another podcast. I can't even remember which one, but she was saying
Mm-hmm.
like treat money like you would treat a friend. Like would you be overly clingy to a friend? Maybe not, because
Mm-hmm.
then that would cause them to kind of back away. Or would you neglect a friend? Probably not,
Mm-hmm.
because that would like ruin the relationship. So like the same way
Exactly,
you would
yeah.
treat a friend or you would like to be treated as a friend, treat your money.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was like brilliant. So
Okay, okay.
yeah.
So speaking of, I mean, living in Toronto, Toronto being
Mm.
super expensive, what is your opinion there? Because there's constantly discussions about like rent versus buy,
Oh my God, yeah.
and like what's the better option, right? When people look at mortgages now, they're like, okay, well, if I rent, my rent is less than a mortgage.
Right.
So what is your suggestion in that regard?
And
Or like, what's your take really?
yeah, honestly, it's interesting because now that like I'm a homeowner,
Mm-hmm.
there's things like property tax and we're in a condo, so condo fees, and then your
Mm-hmm.
actual mortgage and like a bunch of other expenses that you sometimes overlook because of the excitement of owning something.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I stand on this? I have to be honest, having a mortgage is not fun. Like it's actually
Mm-hmm.
not. I miss renting where you just have
Mm-hmm.
to worry about rent and that's it. I think it
Yeah.
ultimately comes down to your goals. So like for example, me and my husband, we're not looking to pay off a mortgage. Like that's not our
Mm-hmm.
goal. Our goal
Mm.
is to hold property and actually use it as an investment. So we're not going to be using it as our primary residence forever.
Mm-hmm.
We would
Mm-hmm.
love to take advantage of equity that we build in it, use that equity to buy more properties, rent it out, and essentially probably go back to renting.
Okay,
because it's
okay.
more flexible. Like you can pick
Mm-hmm.
up and leave when you want, and the properties would actually serve as a um, I don't want to say like pension or retirement fund, but we have enough properties that later down the line, selling it would be a form of income for us, or
Mm-hmm.
the rental income itself would be a form of income for us. So
Yeah.
it depends on how you want to use it. For on the other hand, for example, like my parents, like my parents are immigrants. Like my dad is very much like you buy a house and you pay down the mortgage
Mm-hmm.
until
Yeah.
zero. And I'm looking at
Yeah.
him like, okay,
No.
like that's your opinion. That's your opinion, but like that's
Yeah.
not what we're gonna do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So like it just depends on like what your goals are. I would say for anybody that's like very much looking to bounce around and gets bored very easily and has
Mm-hmm.
dreams of being like location independent, buying a property, unless, like I said, you're going to just be renting it out, maybe do a little
Mm-hmm.
Airbnb flip or something, like don't buy
Yeah.
because
Fair
then you're
enough.
just gonna, it's so expensive. Most of your disposable income will be going into the upkeep of the house, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not aligned with your goals.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at the core, what are your goals? On the other hand, too, like if you just want to stay in an area or a city or like or a suburb, raise your
Mm-hmm.
family, and you know you want to stay there
Mm-hmm.
forever, buy a house because then you know
Yeah.
you're going to be there forever. So it just depends. But I
Yeah.
can say I'm not loving the experience,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I'm glad that we were able to buy something downtown Toronto.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, for
Hmm.
sure. And I feel like it's one of those things, like it's probably hard right now, but you know,
Hmm.
like you have your sights set on
Yeah,
something else, right? Like you know
exactly.
what the end goal is, you know what the dream is. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed too is that a lot of people are going outside of the city to buy,
Hmm.
and they're just using it like day one. It's an investment property, right?
Yes.
So they rent in the city. Their home might be, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 hours away, even
Yeah.
depending on.
Yeah.
But for them, it's solely an investment. So that's another
Exactly.
way that I see a lot of people get into the market.
Yeah, exactly. And actually,
Yeah.
if I had to go back, that may have been an avenue we would have looked more into. It's just that
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more regulations, like, if it's not your primary residence and they know that it's not your primary residence, that's
Mm-hmm.
20% down versus as
Mm-hmm.
low as
Five.
5%. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to kind of like, do your own due diligence. But yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that's like a brilliant way to get started as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up in Sweden. I don't know if you know this, but
Hmm.
um, I find what happens is a lot of time when I go visit my friends,
Hmm.
their housing costs are like 15% of their income, if
Oof.
even that. Like it's like they're living
Wow.
for next to nothing. They have
Wow.
beautiful units. They are homeowners at a very young age. In your opinion, where do you feel people should cap themselves? Because I
Mm.
know some people that are like a full paycheck goes straight into their housing costs, right? Like
Yeah.
at what percentage do you find like anything above this is like danger zone?
Yeah. See, again, it kind of depends. Like if you're making, 100K, well, I wouldn't even say 100K because 100K in this city is like nothing. Um,
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, I would say
Yeah.
if you're netting like after taxes, if you're netting, I don't know, 10K a month
Mm-hmm.
and it's costing you 5K for your living expenses,
Mm-hmm.
like objectively, just like looking at that number, is that a lot? Yes. Like,
Yeah.
however, what are you doing with the other 5K?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And is it like growing? Like, what are
Yeah.
you doing?
Yeah.
However, if you're making, 4K a month and your living expenses are coming to half of that, so 2K, and then you're left with 2K in this
Mm-hmm.
city, it may be tough, right? But
Mm-hmm.
again, what are you doing with the 2K? So
Right.
finance is so annoying sometimes. Personal
Yeah.
finance is annoying because, like, that's a great question. And that's a question I get asked a lot. Like, how much should I
Mm-hmm.
be spending on X? But it really
Mm-hmm.
depends. Like, do
Yeah.
you have kids? Like, if you're making 4K a month and then 50% of your income is rent and that other 2K is for you, you still have to pay, like,
Mm-hmm.
for groceries, like, whatever the kid needs, your own needs, and like other
Yeah.
things. Um, Versus a single person. who maybe doesn't have many goals, like they're not looking to own anything, and they're just like living their best life, 2K could be enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I hate to say it, but it all kind of comes down back to like your goals. Like, what are you looking to do? And then
Mm-hmm.
kind of work backwards from there. But
Yeah.
I will say, if I quote any like financial literacy books or whatever, they typically say don't go over 50%.
50.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
50%. Because then
Okay.
that's
That's
a lot.
Yeah, for
Hmm.
sure, for sure. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's so circumstantial. You
Hmm.
can't really just fit it into one box, one solution. I find like for myself, every few months I try to revisit my budget,
Yes.
right? Take
Yeah.
a closer look and actually like stay on top of it, know what's going on, and really like assess what's going on, right? Because I find it so easy, especially now. It's like we're not holding tangible money anymore. So it's like you just
No.
tap and go, and before you know it, you're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
what happened?
Honestly,
Yeah,
honestly.
it's weird. And for me, like the one saving grace is the fact that I don't even know. It was like on Slice way back in the day. This mixed lady, I forget her name. What was
Yes.
her name?
Um, and she had an accent, right? Yeah.
Yes, and she did the whole couples thing
Yes.
and like Gail backside.
Gail.
Yes.
Yes. Slice. I'm so dead.
Oh my
Yes. Yes.
God. It's like I can't even remember the last time. I don't even have TV, so
Same.
I'm not even watching Slice now.
Same.
Like I stream everything.
Same.
But yeah, she was like the truth, and that's what
Hmm.
really opened me up. She had a free spreadsheet on her website
Mm.
that till this day I use. Till this day it
Wow.
has, because remember she had those jars?
Yep. Hmm.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, I don't have jars. I don't even use physical cash,
Right.
but it's like the spreadsheet works the same.
Yep.
You know exactly like how much spend you have.
Yep.
So that's been really helpful. But yeah, I find like constantly looking back, revisiting,
Yes.
not being afraid to look at your finances. I find so many people are like,
Major key. Like the friend example, like you wouldn't just like abandon your friend and never check
yeah,
in on them. Like
yeah,
if you're not looking at your app like at
mm-hmm,
least once a
mm-hmm,
week,
mm-hmm.
like how do you even navigate life? Like I
Yeah,
don't,
it's
yeah, it's
impossible.
impossible, especially how quickly like cash goes in and out of your
Oof,
accounts. Like
so
every
fast.
week you should be looking at that app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find like I try to make it a I mean, it depends. I
Yeah.
find if I'm staying at home and I'm
Hmm.
not doing anything, I'm not worried.
Yeah.
But the moment I leave my house, because you leave your house and it's like 100,
Yep.
200, 300, and it's like I just went down the street and came back. Like, how
100%.
am I spending this much money? So I
100%.
find like, yeah, once I come home, if I know I've had a day out,
Yes.
I'm like, let me look it over.
Yes.
What do I need to transfer?
Yep.
Like, if I'm using something on my credit card, I'm like transferring it over the same day.
Exactly.
So I don't even have to think about it. So
Yeah.
I
100%.
completely agree with you.
Hmm.
If you could go back
Mm.
and do something different, like now that I mean, I know you've worked in the financial space for a while, so you
Hmm.
probably had like a lot of probably good habits or better than most. But if there's anything that you could change going back, what would that be?
Oof. Okay, so definitely I would not rely on credit so much. Like when I first, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it kind of wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't my fault, but like I said, I was not making much. So
Mm-hmm.
credit did help me when I needed it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
just, I got into this bad cycle with it at the beginning and time when I could have been putting it towards like actual savings. I was really aggressively trying to pay it off. So that kind of
Mm-hmm.
hurt a little bit. Second, and I won't call it a regret,
Okay.
but it's definitely something that, like in hindsight, sure. When I
Yeah.
first moved to Toronto, I was living in an older apartment in Davisville area, and the rent
Mm-hmm.
was it was rent controlled. So even when we left there in like 2021 or so, or 2020, no, 2021,
Mm-hmm.
the rent was still
Mm-hmm.
under 2K for like a rather large one bedroom. And we moved into like a luxury condo that
Mm-hmm.
we were renting for 3K.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I loved
How many bedrooms?
2 bedrooms, two
Okay.
bathrooms, right?
Okay.
I loved that condo, but
Mm-hmm.
at the time I was already making 6 figures. Could we have stayed in the older Davisville apartment?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Was it uncomfortable knowing that I was now making so much more that like I was kind of like, okay, we deserve a washer and dryer in our unit?
Yeah.
Yeah. But like on paper, I do think about like, okay, if we could have stayed there for the 1 year that I was making the six figures, how much more could I have saved? I do think about that. I won't lie. Um,
Fair
I don't
enough.
regret the move, but I
Yeah,
think about
of
that a lot.
course. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I would say is I wish when I was living at home, I took way more advantage of not having any bills because I left home at like 25 and I was
Okay.
working like a real job after university. So like I had a lot of money on my hands. I was just kind of
Mm.
wasting. And I wish I didn't do that. Even if I was putting away a little bit in like an
Yeah.
investment or something, it would have done me wonders compared to what I ended up doing, which was like stupid stuff. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
fair enough. Okay, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Now, I'm so glad that you brought, like, your last point was talking about home,
Hmm.
because one thing I know that a lot of our habits start at a very young age,
Yeah.
right? Watch our parents, we see what they do. Did you grow up in a household where they were good with money, where they managed their money, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like especially my dad, he worked at a bank like when he was in Nigeria, like he worked in a bank, so he was financially literate. And he would always tell me like from jump when I started making money at like a retail store, like make sure you're saving 50% of your paycheck. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And I would just roll my eyes like, yeah, 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 I
Yeah.
got time.
Yeah.
But yeah, my dad was very, very good
Nice.
with that. And so I'm fortunate to have that. Yeah.
Yeah, nice, nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I find like a lot of situations, it's like, why would I stay home? I'm paying rent here anyways, or I'm
Hmm.
helping with this bill, or I'm doing that, so I might as well go out and do it on my own. And sometimes I'm like, I get
Yeah.
that. However, 50% of one bill is different than 100% of another.
100%.
So
Yeah.
staying at home, although sometimes it can be hard, you want to find your independence, you want to
Hmm.
do all that. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Like staying home, whether you are helping out or if you're not, I mean, either way, usually it works out
100%.
and you can save more and yeah, just ultimately do better.
Yeah, and sometimes clients that come to me, like they're so gung ho on moving out, and then we'll go through the numbers together. We'll just pick like, okay, like what area would you consider? Then we'll sort of come up with an example of like what rent could be, and then we'll put it in their budget, and they'll realize like, oh, like I actually can't afford this. And then by the end of the call, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna just stay home.
Yeah, yeah, fair.
So
Good for
yeah, that
you.
would be a tip I would say. Like if you're really trying to move out, that's great.
Budget it.
Budget it. Yeah, like
Yeah, show me the numbers.
go on the site, look at the area you're looking at, two bedroom
Yeah.
this, one bedroom this, downtown Toronto, put the number in and see like what does that look like? Does it work?
Yeah.
And that'll humble you real quick.
Good for you.
Mm.
Good for you. Yeah, I think that's so important. Just
Yeah,
making it real, making it realistic so people
exactly.
understand really what they're walking into. And yeah, I
Yeah.
find all too often it's like everything just looks so amazing on the outside, right? You're like, oh, I want to be there. I want to live how my friends are living.
Yeah.
But it's like it's hard out
Yeah.
here. So make the right
Right.
decisions and make them early on, sooner rather than later. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
any tips and tricks? Because I know when it comes to like credit, things like that, is there anything that you're like, this is one tip that someone could walk away from this podcast, whether it comes to ways to increase their credit or managing their finances or basically just anything?
Hmm. So a couple of things like off the top of my head, like I said, the splurge
Mm-hmm.
account, I really advise doing that. Deprivation like is the worst thing that you can
Yeah.
do because it'll just cause you to just self-sabotage sometimes
Mm-hmm.
and then go out of control and spiral. So definitely the splurge account. The second thing I would say, oh my God, this is the top one that a lot of people actually don't
Yeah.
do, is separate your accounts. Like the account that you're receiving money in, don't use that same account to pay
Ah.
bills. Unless you are super
Mm-hmm.
organized and like you have it memorized, do not do
Yeah.
that. Like you're just you're just putting yourself in a situation where you're going to overspend
Mm-hmm.
and then one bill will be affected and whatever. So please, if I'm going to say one thing, get your money into one account and then have another account, even if it's just one other account that you're paying your bills from.
Okay.
That way it's like separate. You don't have to worry about it. When you get paid, you transfer the money that you need for your bills
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
out, and then whatever is left, you can do whatever you want with, save, spend on whatever,
Nice.
pay debt. Yeah. So that's what I would say. Number three, I would say when it comes to credit cards, um, try to keep it lower than 30%. So your utilization, if you don't know what utilization is, it's like how much out of your total limit are
Mm-hmm.
you using
Mm-hmm.
or have you drawn down? So if your credit card is $1,000 limit, you don't carry more than
Mm-hmm.
$300 on it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it goes over, it's fine, but just don't have it maxed out for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, try and keep it under the 30%. If you want to calculate how to get your number, take your total limit, multiply it by zero point
Mm-hmm.
0.3, and then that will be how much you should have on your credit
Mm-hmm.
card. As soon as you keep a balance over 30%, it will start to impact your credit
Mm-hmm.
score. Um, so that's like the one of the easier ways to increase your credit score, I would
Okay,
say.
nice.
Um, and what else? In terms of saving, I'm trying to touch like all
Yeah.
categories. In terms of savings, automate it,
Mm-hmm.
set it and forget it because I've been there where Caravana is coming up
Oh yeah.
and you're like, oh, let me just skip my savings because I want to like live my best life.
Mm-hmm.
Just automate it because like you can still live your best life, but imagine living your best life and you know you've already paid
Right.
yourself first,
Right.
right? So
There's
set
actually
it and
nothing
forget
better.
it. There's
Yeah.
nothing better because then you can like enjoy
Mm-hmm.
without like
The
the
stress.
guilt. You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
stress. So I would say, yeah, automate it for sure. All banks have a service, whether you can do it online or go into the branch and do it. Um, Set that up for yourself.
Yeah.
And one thing I would say, I get a lot of questions about like couples
Mm-hmm.
and how to like navigate that. I would 100% say, like, if you haven't had a money conversation with your spouse or your boyfriend or your husband, your wife, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
please have that conversation because I can't even imagine being in the same house. You're the two of you are working towards the same goal and you don't even know how much each of you are
Yeah.
making. Like,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
So I know it's uncomfortable. Like, I know it can be awkward. I know there's like some feelings of like, oh, am I going to get judged for this or
Mm-hmm.
whatever? But have that conversation, air it out, so then at least you know where to go from
Yeah.
there rather than just like living in this like shadow and then you guys want to buy property and then you find out the other person's credit score is
Yeah.
trash and like you can't get anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely like have that discussion with your partner to make sure that you're on the same page and build a budget together.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to have your money going in the same account, but at least be aware of like what you're going to cover, what they're
Mm-hmm.
going to cover, if it's 50-50, 70-30, 60-40,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But have the conversation because it makes life a lot easier. And that was the conversation me and my husband had even before like we knew we were going to be like long
Right.
term.
Husband and wife.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Because it was just like, why not?
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I'm
Yeah.
so glad you brought that up because I feel like when it comes to money, people get so uncomfortable. Like you notice it, like if you're
Yeah.
in a group of friends, you start talking about salary and people are like, "Oh, I may." Like, it everything just
Yeah.
becomes awkward. And I wish
Yeah.
we didn't hold such a like just a weird energy around money, right? Um,
Same.
Transparency is so important, especially in relationships. Like, yeah, you don't have to walk around telling everyone how much you make, but if you're
Hmm.
in a relationship with someone, if you're sharing a household with someone, even if you have
Yep.
roommates, things like that, like I think it's important to have those conversations and be a little bit transparent in terms of not even a little bit, a lot of it
A
transparent in terms of,
lot.
yeah, what are you making? How much debt do you have? What are your money habits? How do you view money,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
What's your even like if you want to get into attachment styles to money, like what does that look like, right?
Hmm.
Um, I've definitely had my fair share of experiences, like in my old relationship, where money was a source of conflict almost because the way that we viewed money
Mm,
was so different.
yeah,
And it's so important to just eliminate that out the gate because those are things that are gonna, I mean, it's always gonna come up. And that's what leads to divorces and all this other stuff, right? That you don't want.
exactly.
So I
Yeah,
completely agree with you.
exactly.
So,
Test it on a friend.
exactly, exactly.
Like you're not even like just test it on a friend and just tell them how much you
Yeah,
make.
yeah, exactly.
And I think that will like kind of break the ice
Mm-hmm.
and you'll get a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So, another question, and we're almost coming to a close, but I'm also curious for the
Yeah.
ones that are really discouraged, that are like in debt right now, money is just
Mm.
like every time they look at their account, it's like a pit in their stomach, anxiety around money. What would you say to them?
Yeah, so I always like whenever I encounter a client like that, I'm like, listen, there's like two things that we can do.
Mm-hmm.
We can either cut your expenses or increase your income,
Mm.
right? Like literally, it always comes down to like
Mm-hmm.
those two decisions.
Mm-hmm.
On the increase your income side, job.
Yeah, yeah,
Unfortunate, like
yeah.
job, right? I will say, your best bet at making more money is by leaving your
I knew you were
company,
gonna say that. Yep.
right? Your biggest increase will always be
Mm-hmm.
when you jump to another company. And I know there's been people that, like me, I was with a particular bank for like a really long time, and
Yeah.
for me to leave was so painful.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when I went from making 77 to
Yeah, there
100,000,
you go.
right? And I would have never gotten
Yeah,
that pay increase
yeah,
if I stayed at that
yeah.
company. So that's one way to boost your income through a job
Mm-hmm.
or get a side
Yeah.
hustle. I mean, the day of just getting one paycheck
Mm-hmm.
from like one place is like so slim now
Yeah.
because we know like how companies are moving these
Mm-hmm.
days. So start an Instagram page, go on TikTok, do
Mm-hmm.
your thing, showcase what you can do, and like try and get paid for
Yeah.
it. That's on that side.
Yeah.
On the other side, decrease your expenses.
Mm-hmm.
This is the one that, is actually the easiest one because it's the
Really
one that you can
is. Yep.
control. And like you said that you always do like a review of your expenses after you've like spent.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great way to see like where you can cut down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know Toronto is not the easiest place for this, but like look at where you're living.
Mm-hmm.
If you realize that you're exceeding the 50% as a benchmark, you may want to kind of look into that and see like, does this make sense based on what I'm making? Can I cut that down? Subscriptions are like
Mm-hmm.
a really
Mm-hmm.
sneaky
Oh yeah.
way of
Those
racking up.
Apple charges, like no.
Apple, yes. If you go into your iPhone, for those who have an iPhone, you go into settings and then you go into your little subscription area
Mm-hmm.
and you see how many things are being taken out, it's actually ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start with the subscriptions. If you know somebody that can give you the password to
There's
theirs,
always
like
someone.
there's always somebody. Try that. The foods that we're buying, sometimes, it's a matter of picking between rice and potato
Mm-hmm.
and something real expensive at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
So just like little things.
Yeah.
But I always start with like, what can you cut down?
Right.
It's gonna be hard, but like you have to if you want to see some sort of
Mm-hmm.
change. And then the second question or the third question is like, what do you do with it then? So
Mm-hmm.
you've cut the expense or you've increased your income.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, on one end, if you've increased your income, don't do the lifestyle
Yeah.
creep
So easy.
that we just talked about. Like,
Yeah.
keep your expenses the same so
Mm-hmm.
that you can actually take advantage of the increase that you just
Mm-hmm.
made. And then on the other hand, if you're able to cut down on your expenses, then what are you going to do now with that extra that you've now created for
Mm-hmm.
yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I hope it's that you're putting it in a savings account and
Mm-hmm.
building an emergency fund because that is
Mm-hmm.
like the number one thing. If you don't have that, you will always be in debt,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because what are you going to use when you're in a
Yeah.
situation? Credit.
Mm-hmm.
You know
Yep.
what I mean? And then what are you going to use to pay down the credit?
Yeah.
Nothing because you're like really tight. So, yeah, use the excess, build an emergency savings, 3 months worth of expenses, 6 months of expenses, whichever school of thought
Mm-hmm.
you believe in,
Mm-hmm.
just have something. Even just start at like, I just want to have
Mm-hmm.
$1,000. Once you have $1,000, then you can start to build up on it. But that first thousand is always like the motivating
Mm-hmm.
first step
Yeah.
and then go from there.
Okay,
Hmm.
nice. I love that. Really good tips.
Yeah.
And for all of you
Good.
six-figure earners out there, yeah, just take it, be intentional. I find that's what's so
Yes.
important. Just be intentional. If you are reducing your expenses or yeah, whatever you're doing, make sure whatever you're doing with that extra money that it actually goes somewhere so you can see it and
Yeah.
feel it at the end. Because I remember when
100%.
I sold my car and I was like, oh my gosh, got rid of my car and I don't have car payments and I don't have insurance. And if I wasn't careful, I wouldn't have noticed that extra $600. Like, it's just like,
No.
it's so easy. So you got to be intentional. Make sure you put it somewhere where it's actually going to be put to good use. Reinvest
Yeah.
it. Find different ways that it can grow. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, enjoy it,
Yeah.
like you said. Definitely enjoy it
Yeah.
because we work way
Like
too hard to not enjoy the things that we do or the fruits of our labor, really.
100%.
So, yeah, I agree.
100%.
So, for
100%.
people that want to work with you or they want to learn more,
Yes.
where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. The handle is she's, so SHES. Richer. Um, Website is underway. I'm on a hiatus as well for the summer.
Fair enough.
I gave myself a break.
Yeah. Listen, it's summer
But
is so short in Toronto. You deserve it.
yeah, exactly. So I gave myself a little break,
Yeah.
but coaching is resuming shortly. So you
Okay.
can book a one-on-one, working on some group programs as well, because people really enjoy those.
Mm-hmm.
But you can always hit me in my DMs and
Nice.
have a chat, and then we can go from there. So yeah, Instagram.
Awesome, awesome, perfect. And I'll put the details in the show notes as well, for those
Thank
that are looking to
you.
connect with you. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Honestly,
Of
this is such
course.
an important conversation. I find it so easy to overlook these conversations, and I
Hmm.
find they often come way too late when you have
Yeah.
accumulated all this debt, you have made all these bad decisions. And so I want to ensure that people who are listening to this podcast that are looking to move into tech, or maybe if you're even in tech now, like it's never too late, but definitely take charge of your own finances, your own life, because you only have one and you got to live it. You got to live it well. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. One thing I will add though,
Hmm.
those of you in tech, going to tech, please take advantage of your options, like your ownership
Yes. That's a
benefits.
big one.
Like that's a huge one. I won't
Yeah.
even get into that because they all vary and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But pay attention and like read the details because that's where you can make a lot of money is in
Hmm.
the stocks that you get from your job.
Yeah, yeah, you're so right. You're so right.
Yeah.
Definitely options. I agree with that. Look for where they can
Hmm.
match you with your RSPs, things like that.
Yeah.
There's so many ways, but once again, talk to a professional, people that know this stuff,
Hmm. Yeah.
because it's so hard to know all of this. I actually just had a meeting with my bank today. I don't have a financial planner, but I definitely
Hmm.
have a bank where I can sit down, have meetings. They can take a look at stuff
Yep.
for me, which has worked
Yep.
pretty well for me. But talk to people that know what they're talking about. Because
Yes.
as much as I've been into my finances and I like buy stocks, I invest. I was talking to a friend the other day and he said something where I was like, wait a minute, what? What am I,
Hmm.
how did I miss this? So that's what prompted my
Exactly.
meeting today on my lunch. But yes,
Exactly.
so stay
Yes.
up to date, do all the good things. And yes, once again, thank you so much for tuning into the Technically Yes
Of
podcast. As always, I'm your
course.
host, Stella, and I look forward to speaking with you guys next week. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning into the Technically Yes podcast. If you like today's episode, rate this podcast 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you would like to get in touch with me, reach out to me on Instagram at the Tech Yes Pod and find me and subscribe on YouTube by looking up the Technically Yes podcast. Thanks again and chat to you guys next week.